Welcome to Circular Friends. Amy Whitney here today with my very special guest, Robin Retallick. Robin is a founding member of the Law of Attraction Club. He spends a portion of his time assisting seekers in understanding the universal laws and applying them to create the life they want to live. Robin, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
This is a really exciting show for me because I'm going to be handing the reins over to you a little while later. But before we get to that point, do you mind sharing a little bit of information about yourself with the audience, and of course include details about the Law of Attraction Club?
Sure. Well, I started out life in Australia, which accounts for my accent, or I would say lack of accent. In my early days, I spent a lot of time involved with the church. Then I guess in my midlife, I entered a period of if you can't see it and touch it, then it probably doesn't exist. But still exploring a lot. Then I came over here to the US and began a company here, and hooked up with a gal from Georgia who ended up coming and staying with me and living with me in San Francisco, Eva Gregory, who is my other half here. And she was into a few things too, and we did a bit of exploration of different things. We did some work with Deepak Chopra and so on. And then in about 1990, she came across Esther Hicks channeling Abraham. And she got into that before I even knew what it was. And then she left a CD in the car one day with audio on it, and I started listening to some of this stuff. And I was pretty skeptical at first, but in the end, it started to make sense. It started to answer questions I had, and it started to hook up with some things I'd heard earlier in my life that made sense to me. So fast forward now to 2008, and so now we had 18 plus years of listening to Abraham audios, and I probably did, we were on their gluttony program as they call it, which is basically everything they're doing. And so I'd listened probably by that stage to 2,000 plus hours of audio of Esther channeling Abraham, basically teaching the law of attraction, and thought we pretty much knew what it was all about by then. We had some idea that of the law of attraction. Excuse me, clearing my throat there. And some idea of what channeling was. And then at the end of 2007, actually, Eva pointed me at someone who was also channeling Abraham. And this sort of intrigued me, and I did nothing about it for a while, and then eventually hooked up with her. And long story short, I ended up talking with another gal who was also started to channel Abraham, and we decided to form the Law of Attraction Club. And our intention then was basically just to do pretty much what Esther was doing with Abraham, which is running seminars, answering questions, Q&A sort of format, teaching people what we knew and could do and so on about law of attraction and how to create the world they want. Well, so then we set up the Law of Attraction Club and we got into it. Our format was a little different. We were going to do it by conference call. Eva had been a coach. Eva is a coach, a life coach, and also a Law of Attraction coach, and had been doing conference calls, which I'd helped her with. And so we knew the technology of doing conference calls. So we thought, well, rather than getting people into a physical location, we'll just do conference calls. And so that was our plan. And we got a few surprises along the way. The first thing was that as we stepped into this world of, spirituality, if you will. I hate to use that word, but that's probably the best word to describe it. We discovered there was an enormous number of stories about the way things were. There was sacred geometry, there was astrology, there was extraterrestrials, there was this and that, and great detail in all of these things, and all of them, many of them very different, and some of them contradictory. And so I said to Abraham, we called them Terah to avoid any conflict with the work that Jerry and Esther were doing. Said to Terah, what's going on here? And they said, well, of course, by the law of attraction, you attract into that which is a match to you. And so as these people open up to this, then they attract to them their story and it's true for them. So as you choose to believe things, what happens is that your world lines up with that. And so for each of these people having detailed stories is their own story, and it's true for them. And I thought, well, okay, that's interesting. But what is there that lies beneath it all that's independent of a belief choice, independent of a belief system, independent of an individual's, own story? And what we got to were two things, basically. One is you exist because you are a part of all that is, part of God, part of the universe, however you want to describe it. That's the first thing, and no choice in that. That's who you are. Secondly, the law of attraction is the organizing principle of all energy flow, and energy is matter, so it's the organizing principle of everything in your world. Not a choice about that either. And apart from those two things, everything is a choice. And as soon as we say everything, of course, people start to put boxes around, well, okay, this is a choice, but they think, well, that's not a choice, and so on. Everything except from that is a choice. So that was our first discovery. And then shortly after we began the club, we suddenly had a lot of people coming to us saying, I think I'm starting to channel. And this was a bit of a puzzle because, at that stage we thought, only a few people do this, like Esther, for example. And our plan was one channel, one entity, one message to the world. And then all of a sudden we had people coming out of the woodwork, I think I'm starting to channel. So once again, said to Terah, what's going on here? Is it that we've attracted everybody on the universe that wants to channel right now, or is everybody going to be channeling? And they said yes and yes. And you also, Robin, will be channeling if that is your desire. Well, of course, it wasn't my desire at that point. But I thought, okay. Shortly after that, Eva, my other half, started channeling. And not long after that, I started channeling.
Wow.
And so here we were, having come from our original concept of one channel, one entity, one sort of message, and now we were stepping into these different worlds. And that was really fascinating. The other big breakthrough, I guess, we had was that I'm looking out my window here on the San Francisco Bay, right? And Eva's in the next room in a parallel window looking out on the same view. And I'd be saying to Terah, well, surely she's looking at the same world that I'm looking at. And they said, that is the appearance, but that is not so. You're creating your world, and she's creating her world. And I said, but I can walk into her office and look at the same one. It looks the same. And they said, well, when you are agreeing to intersect, when you are matched to the person that's her in the next room and intersecting, then you will see pretty much the same world for that scene because you're jointly, if you like, participating in a matching world. And I couldn't get it. I just couldn't get it. It was just. I didn't get that. So they said, go read up on quantum physics. So I did. And it turns out that apart from lots of other things I discovered when I did that, very interesting little exercise. But here's the scientific community wrestling with things that are absolutely counter to what they have always believed. They've discovered things that the experimenter affects the result of the experiment. That things blink in and out of existence. What seems to be a solid world is not. And, by the way, the most popular theory now for explaining all of these phenomena is that there are multiple realities. In other words, you make a choice to go left at the fork, there's another version of you that goes right at the fork. And you are in each of those versions experiencing the world as if it's uniquely yours and uniquely you. So then I came back and talked about that with Tara. I said, what's this? Is this multiple realities thing? Is that the way it works? And their response was basically, bingo. You got it. So, and they said, go ahead.
That's a difficult one for the time-based reality.
Yes, of
people.
course, absolutely. Yeah. And
it's like, oh.
It took me about, I guess, another 3 or 4 months, Amy, before I finally settled into understanding the way it all works.
Yes.
All right. And that it's such a convincing world. Of course, it's designed to be. I mean, that's the way the game is set up. It's designed to look like one solid, continuous world that we all share and we all deal with. That's the way it looks. That's the appearance of it. But actually, you're creating your own world.
And so what you do is assist those who want to create a better world for themselves. Is that the purpose now of your group?
Yes. And you don't need to know anything about the way it all works, really. I mean, all you really need to know is that by your thoughts you create, and nothing is more important than you feel good. So always reaching for the better feeling thought is always going to head you in the direction of where you want to go. That's the whole story, really. Except that, of course, there's a few details along the way that people want to know, and rightly so, right? Because as it turns out, changing your world means changing your thought habits, and some of those thought habits are very solidly entrenched. And if you're going to go to the effort of changing those habits, you need to have a reasonably, you need to be reasonably confident that the reason you're doing it is valid. In other words, that the process you're stepping into is going to work. Otherwise, why would you do it? And so it turns out that there's people like me and other people out there who have an intense curiosity to know the way it all works. And so our intent really is to help people understand the way it all works. And we do get into some of these explanations, and we do boggle people's mind a little bit. But ultimately, it's a small piece, a small price to pay for really understanding, the basics. And if you can but stretch your mind a little to understanding, some of these concepts here, then all of a sudden everything starts to make sense. And all the puzzle pieces that I used to have trouble fitting into place suddenly started to fall into place.
And my questions, I feel like they're going to be so basic because this is all, I mean, I've heard it all before, but I haven't necessarily processed it.
Yes.
So are you all right if I throw out some kindergarten type questions?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Now, I agree with you. I'm more and more hearing that more people are channeling. My question about that is, how do we trust the source? And is it possible to channel, even if you are a good person, is it possible to channel something that isn't necessarily for the best?
Okay, so excellent question, because a lot of this, of course, is bound up in channeling and what is it and what happens with it. And that's another part of the things we learned, since starting this Law of Attraction Community Club in 2008. Because at the time we started that, I was of the opinion that whatever came out of Esther's mouth when she was channeling Abraham was sort of straight from source, straight from God. So therefore, if I didn't understand it, or it seemed foreign to me, that I was assuming that was my inability to understand it. What we discovered in this channeling process is that channeling is always a process of collaboration between the channeled entities and the channeler. Even in so-called deep trance channeling, there is nothing that is ever comes out of the mouth of a human being that is not part of who they are. So that is why you get the different stories. Let me give you an example. When Nina and I set up the Law of Attraction Club, she was heavily into astrology. And so I had Tara explaining to me why astrology worked and how it worked. And this was very puzzling to me because astrology seemed to me to be a lot of nonsense. From my logical engineering mind, it was a lot of nonsense. And I couldn't figure it out. Even though they were explaining to me this, and this, it didn't make sense to me. Mm-hmm. And I'd learnt enough by that stage to be able to stay independent and ask my own questions. And so behind all of this, Amy, let me say that whenever you hear something that doesn't feel good to you, let it go. In other words, only the way you feel about something can tell you whether this is right or wrong for you. And so anything you hear today that doesn't feel right to you, you are your best judge, and you pass that over. Don't let it go. And so it wasn't until we got to the point of Tara coming back and saying, well, of course astrology is right for Nina, and of course she's going to channel us, pretty much just talking about her belief systems because that's her belief system. And so was in this interactive process as, Eva's channeling and I'm asking her questions and I'm getting slightly different answers or different ways of expressing it from the way Nina does. And then I started channeling myself, and that was a whole different different experience. And so what happens is that the opinions, let me give you the answer to the question I put to Tara, which was, so how much of the message that we hear from anyone who's channeling is them, and how much is the personalities, if you like, that I call them, the vibrational personalities that are actually engaged there. And they said, well, on a good day, with the wind blowing in the right direction, and so on, that was the idea of a joke. If the subject which is being described or answered is one in which the channel does not have strong personal opinions about, and if they are an experienced channel and know how to let go, then most of what we want to say gets through. Right? But if the channel has strong personal opinions and knowledge of, they think, about a certain topic, then of course much more of them will come through. And so that is why you can hear, you go on the web and listen to some of these folks channeling all sorts of entities. You hear these enormously detailed stories about the way things are. And, bless them for doing their thing and so on. But that is their creation. That is their world. It is not my world, right?
Thank you for clarifying that. My husband's been asking about that exact question and trying to understand that now for at least a month. It's what he's been pondering. So that's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you.
And interesting, when I got that, and I went back to some of the questions I'd asked Abraham. I'd been in their hot seat and so on with Esther and so on, and some of the responses really puzzled me. But then I understand, of course, this is Esther's slant on the world. This is Jerry's slant on the world. This is them agreeing the way they're going to think and what they believe and so on. And of course, that's what comes through. So the advantage for me was I had Nina channeling, I had Eva channeling, I had other people within the club that we'd encouraged to channel. And so now I had, 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 people channeling. And I had the advantage then of being able to sift through all of that and really get to the core of what I wanted to know in the best way that I could understand it. So a huge advantage for me.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Now there's a statement that I've read that you wrote, and it feels a little contrary to what, I know you don't like the word spiritual, and I don't use it very often, but say like the spiritual teachers out there are teaching at the moment.
Yes.
And the statement is, there is not one world we all share. Yes. Now, I know you chatted about the San Francisco Bay and that experience. Is that what you are explaining by making that statement?
Yes. In other words, let me describe. Let me describe this. When you woke up this morning, Amy, what you did was immediately create the world around you. You created the bed and the floor and the walls. You created time. You created gravity. When you opened your eyes, you created what you saw. Now, how much energy did you put into doing that? How much conscious thought did you put into doing that? Not much, right?
Automatic pilot.
Absolutely. And as you step into the world, in other words, you get up and you do things and you walk from room to room, you are literally creating that scene ahead of you. If you imagine you're looking at a movie here, or let's say you're looking at a scene in a room, there's some people talking in a room. When you look at that from in the movie, you see them in the room. If you could see the movie set, you would see that, there's only 3 walls to that room, really, and there's no ceiling. There's only lights and cables and cameras and people running around all over the place behind here, right? Mm-hmm. But what you see is the room, and your mind fills in not only the rest of the room as a context that you can't even see, but it fills in a world around it. So if this movie's about, Canada in the year 1900, it's set there, you will already have imagined a setting for that and what appears outside and what will be outside and the way people will talk and the way people interact and so on and so on. So you provide the context. So it is with the world you create. You're only really ever creating that which you see. In other words, right now, Amy, the wall behind you that you cannot see does not exist until you turn around and look at it.
I love it. Like I said, I know that this is probably kindergarten stuff to you, but it's just, it's actually moving to hear this,
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Now, you also mentioned that you create your point of attraction by expectations, conscious and subconscious. Can you run through that for me?
Yes, absolutely. So here we are, and the old version of the law of attraction, which I had come to understand through 18 years of dealing with Esther and so on, was, you attract into your experience that which you give your energy, focus, and attention, whether wanted or unwanted. So it's all about conscious focus. And then they said, yes, but in the morning when you wake up, that's the world you create. And I said, well, I didn't create too much. There wasn't too much conscious focus, energy, or attention to create the walls, the floor, time, gravity, and everything this morning. And to her, I said, no, it's because you expect it will be there. And I said, well, I didn't expect it consciously. And they said, no, it's the fabric of your unconscious expectations. So the whole idea of this subconscious world suddenly sprang into opened up a complete new understanding about the way we attract. Mm-hmm. So throughout your life, you have chosen to believe things, either because the people that told you sounded like they knew what they were talking about, your parents, your teachers, or whatever, or you just had an experience and you chose to believe it was a certain way and you practiced that belief. And you practiced all of those beliefs, and you practiced them into what you just plain know. And out of that, what you just plain know, you expect the world to be a certain way. And it is. You are literally creating your world second by second, not just from this conscious piece, which is a very small piece of your, if you like, conscious abilities, but you're creating it from that conscious place and from the subconscious place.
Wow. It's amazing. I love it, and it's leaving me speechless, because it's like, I'm running through my mind going, so I could have done this different, this different, this different.
Absolutely.
And that's not actually real. And it's I guess I've heard all of this before, but the way you describe it and the way you're presenting it is it's so clear to me, and I hope the listeners are getting the same thing from what you're saying. It's amazing.
Well, as we said, it's and I'll talk about that in a minute. That we that just popped out there, I'll talk about that in a minute. It's a bit of a leap of understanding to get to this new understanding of the way the world is. But if you can allow yourself to get there, if you can, it boggles the mind, I know. And as I said, it took me months to get my head wrapped around some of these things. But if you allow yourself to understand the way it works, if you can just get into that place, then all of a sudden, there's no questions that you can't really answer yourself. All of a sudden, everything starts to make sense. And just let me go back and talk about that we piece that popped out there, and you may hear that happen a little bit on this interview.
Okay.
When I started to channel, it was really quite interesting because I was just typing away in a chat session in Skype with a friend. And unbeknownst to me, he'd stepped away from his computer and I was just doing sentence after sentence after sentence after. I was really getting in a role. And he and I talk about spiritual things and you know, all of this stuff at great length. And I was really getting in a role. At the end of the chat, I put, and there was great love here for you. And I thought, and it wasn't like my fingers were on the keyboard being manipulated like a puppet. It was just the logical thing to type. It just felt right. And all of a sudden there were tears streaming down my face. And I realized what had happened. Right? I'd started to channel. And the next day I was describing to him verbally, because we were talking on the phone, I said, this is what happened yesterday when I was doing that chat to you. And at the end of that conversation, I said, and there was a great love here for you. And once again, there were tears streaming down my face, as there are right now, by the way. And so it was really fascinating to me the way in which they sort of elbowed their way through, if you like, into the thing. And with folks like Nina and with Eva, my other half, and with Mary Beth and so on, those who channel in our organisation, it is much more like a switch is thrown. It is more like they say, okay, now I'm going into this mode, and they pause for a minute and they will start, and now they're sort of channeling, all right? With me, and it's different for everybody. Channeling is a totally unique experience for everybody. Everyone can do it. It's as normal and natural as having breakfast, Amy. You could channel. In fact, all it's doing is surfacing into consciousness, part of the conversation that's already going on between you and your inner being. That's all it's doing. And so it's with me, I get it, what I call an attack of the I, we. So I'll be sitting here saying I, and all of a sudden we will pop out. And because at that moment, it feels more like it is we talking than me talking. You know? And it's not easy to describe, but as I said, if you get a few we's popping into this conversation, you will know that it's the hordes, as I affectionately call them, elbowing their way through and deciding that they can handle this better than I can.
So that's why, because I felt really emotional when you were speaking about, and when the we's came through, I felt really emotional, and it would be that energy coming through that would cause that. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I'm very sensitive. I'm not psychic or anything, but I definitely, it's like I feel choked up, and it's, you're just stating, facts, and I wouldn't normally be teary about them, but yeah, when you were speaking about that, I felt, my heart. So
that's because your inner being is sitting there applauding, Amy.
Yes. My outer being wants to as well, but I'm trying to stay focused on the interview. So.
Of course.
Beautiful. Now, I'm not sure. I know that you do processes, and I don't know much about them, but it's part of what you offer on your website. Do you want to share with the audience anything about that, or take us through one, or what's the best way to do this?
Sure. So let me introduce that topic a little bit. So here we are. We're understanding the way it all works. This game we're playing, this game we call Life on Earth, right? How does it all work? And the answer is we create our world second by second. We create it from the fabric of our expectations, both conscious and subconscious, mostly subconscious, because that processor is 1,000 times bigger than our conscious processor. So now we understand the way it works, which is sort of technically nice. But how do I make it work for me? In other words, what do I do now to change this world that I'm in? Because there's some things about it that I'd like to change. What steps do I do? And the answer is, well, of course, you must change your expectations. And so you must practice, if you like, knowing some things that are different from what you've chosen to believe before. And we start out from the process of saying, okay, I believe this, I know this. I know the Earth rotates on this axis. once every 24 hours, and that means the day follows night, follows day, follows night. I know that. And we think that's not a choice. That's clear. I mean, like, that's because that's the world I live in. Remember, go back to those two absolutes we talked about. The two absolutes are you're a part of God, and the law of attraction causes everything to flow. Everything else is a choice. So you want the day to be 25 hours long, 26 hours long. You want to be on a different planet. That's your choice. The only thing that prevents you from being in that world is your belief that it can happen. So let's not get too far out and start changing the nature of our physical world. But maybe there's some things within this world right here and now that you'd like to change. I'm just giving you the limits of possibility here. There are none. There are none. You can have it any way you want. But maybe there's some things that are more immediate in your world that you'd like to change, what we call the low-hanging fruit. And what are those things? Well, those are the things that get you feeling not so good. So here's the other piece of the puzzle that's really interesting. Your feelings are nothing more than an indicator of whether, right at the point of time that you are at, whether you're creating what you want or you're creating what you don't want. And it's very simple. If you're creating what you want, you feel good. In other words, if your conscious and subconscious expectations are lined up, you will feel good. If they're not, you will not. If they're not lined up with what you want, you will not feel good. And feeling good means everything from feeling peace through to interest, through to excitement, through to ecstasy, all right? Feeling bad means everything from mild boredom through frustration, anger, down to suicidal despair. That's the negative end of it. And anytime you're in the negative end, that's a signal that says right now, at this point, what you are creating in your world is not what you want. So clearly, the things that make us not feel good, I'm using the word make there, that nothing makes us not feel good. This is just the way it works. If you're heading in the wrong direction at any point, you don't feel good. So what do you do about it? Well, there's a number of things you can do about it. You can distract yourself. You can go to the movies, pet your cat, do whatever it is, because your natural nature is to rise, for your vibration to rise. And so if you pick things that distract you, then you're on the right track. If you're heading for feeling better, you're on the right track. Or you can do some things that are absolutely, take a positive step towards changing that belief system. So, for example, you would say, what is it that I really want? So if you think now, Amy, in relation to you, and people listening to this recording, think about right now something that you really, really want. All right? And you will have boundaries around it, because we're so used to closing down our desires because we know it's impossible, or because we don't want to be disappointed, or because we're told not to be silly and stop dreaming about that, you'll never get that, and so on and so on. So we bring our borders in, we bring our boundaries in, we bring our fences in, and we close our desires down. So we've become, since we've lost the ability to daydream when we were 3 years old, we lost the ability to imagine without limit. We've been closing these boundaries down. And so the important thing with the question about what I want is, what do I really, really want? What do I really, really, really want? And start to let those boundaries go.
Can I ask a question here?
Of course.
So if I'm not all-knowing, like for instance, I'll just throw, my husband was previously married, yes. And initially when he separated, he thought it was a terrible thing that his wife had fallen in love with someone else, but now he thinks it's the best thing that ever happened to him because he's never been happier.
Sure.
So with situations, what if when I'm sitting in the moment, I'm like, oh, this is awful, this has got to stop, da 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 da, but really it's for the greatest good. Does that make sense to you?
Well, you've talked about two things there, or many things there, Amy. Firstly, is everything always for the greatest good? In other words, is there some force out there that's somehow always leading me in the right direction? And it's very comforting to feel that way. People want to have this omnipotent God that's looking after them or something,
Yes.
right? And so and we often find ourselves just wishing that something was guiding us in the right direction, that everything is going to work out for the best. But it doesn't work that way, actually.
Oh God, really?
What you attract into your experience is a match to what you expect, who you are, what you believe, what you know, what you expect, all right? And that's what determines everything that comes into your world. And so there's nobody out there looking after you. There's no grand purpose you're supposed to fulfill in life, and if you will just find that purpose, you'll be, moving through life wonderfully and so on. There's only...
Oh, Robin, you're crushing me here.
So that's the bad news. Okay, there's no bad news. There's no bad news, but that's the seeming bad news, all right?
Right.
The good news is you can have it any way you want it.
Okay.
The good news is you came to this game for the fun of playing the game. Any game you play, think back to games you play, Amy. Mm-hmm. Any game has rules. And what are rules? Nothing more than restrictions, all right? Mm-hmm. You throw the dice, you can't move any more than the dice says, you land on this spot, you have to go here, you have to do, and so on, all right? Those are the rules of the game. Rules are restrictions. So why would you ever settle for restrictions? Why would you ever want to do that? Because playing the game is fun, all right?
Okay.
Getting into that thing and mixing it up, discovering things, striving and finding out what you can do and what you can't do and winning and all that sort of stuff. That's fun. That is why you're here. These are restrictions that you're in. You chose this limited conscious process that can only look after a certain number of things in its head at one time. You chose this sort of existence, this world. In basics, you said, I'm going to go into this world and I'm going to have this sort of conscious ability, and I'm going to have, we're always at free will, I'm going to be at choice, but I'm going to be in this place and I'm going to play this game. And you came here for the fun of it, for the excitement of it, for the joy of it, for the discovery of it, for everything about it, all right? That's why you are here. And you can play it any way you want to. So,
all right, let's play.
So, here we are. We've got this part of the world that seems to be pinging on me. It's coming at me. All right. It's interesting in this business, if you like, in this business of spirituality, of channeling, of giving people advice, of teaching people. We get sort of four sorts of questions. Three mainly, I guess. For people that don't really know what it's all about, the first thing they'll ask is, should I do A or B? Should I marry Bill or Fred? Should I take this job, or should I move to there or stay here, and so on? Mm-hmm. And nobody can answer that question. Nobody can answer that question. It's a matter of making a choice and making it right. It's a matter of pick the thing that feels best, because that's the choice you're most likely to line up with and feel good about, and feeling good is all that matters. Mm-hmm. The second sort of question is, what do I do with the world that's coming at me? I got this person in my face, I got this thing happening, or this earthquake here, or this is happening over here, or this government is doing this to me, and so on and so on. How do I deal with this world? Mm-hmm. And the answer is, well, there are no techniques for dealing with the world, except if you don't like what's there, create something different. And you don't create differently by doing things, by struggling, by getting 10,000 people together and deciding, well, we'll get together and do this, because remember, it's your world. It's unique to you. So the way you deal with the world is create something different.
Beautiful.
All right. So
I'm ready.
So here's something in your world, perhaps. And the other types of questions, of course, okay, then how do I deal with the world? How do I create what I want, and so on? And that's what we're into mm-hmm. here. And one technique we have, which we call letting go, which is just one way of repainting over some of those old sort of belief systems, is, okay, what is something you'd like to change? So, Amy, you have a relationship, or you and your husband have a relationship with his ex that's not as good as you'd like, or something. Is that a fair statement?
Fair statement, yes. We try to always offer it always comes down to money, and we always try to offer upper middle class support
Mm-hmm.
to the children with everything that goes on, whether it's with braces, whether it's
Yep.
with schooling.
Yep.
And we're beat up every time. And it was like you were talking about how we all live in we're creating our own worlds. When we receive correspondence from his ex-wife, it's like she's speaking a different language. We're going, look at all we're going to give you. And then we get beat up, and, kids are involved, etc. So we want to do what's best and be fair and open, but we feel like everything we do is attacked and threatened and brought down, and we want to shift that.
Okay, so there's something out there in the world that you're trying to deal with, right? And it's coming at you, and you're trying to wrestle with it and find ways of dealing with it and strategies for doing things that make sense, and so on and so on and so on, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's the sort of one world view of everything. Now, we're in one world and we all share it, and we're dealing with this world. That's the one world view. I sometimes think that even as there's the Flat Earth Society, for those that still believe the world is flat, one day the One World Society, for those that still believe there's one world.
Love it.
So here we are, and now what's really going on here is that. Let's leave your husband out of this, Amy, because this is your world, all right? And we can.
Okay.
And yes, you can say we intersect a lot. That's true. You do, all right? You intersect with a version of him, all right? Mm-hmm. And that's the real key word here. A version of him you intersect with, and so you're creating him. Now, creating is a shortcut word. By that, what I mean is that by your point of attraction, by your expectations, you will intersect with a version of him that's a match to that. Mm-hmm. And so if there are things about him that are driving you nuts, it's like there's a mirror out there, right? This is reflecting back to you the things that you are. This is your point of attraction. You don't like what you see out there, change what's creating it. You're writing the screenplay here for your movie, Amy.
Okay.
And everybody on the set is running around second by second matching your screenplay.
Okay.
So you have a casting director that's running around, casting people in the roles you have. They're all following the screenplay faithfully. They may ad-lib their lines a little. You may not be writing the exact words they're using, but basically everything that they're doing conforms to your plot. Mm-hmm. So you don't like what they're doing, then change the screenplay.
Okay.
How do you change the screenplay? Well, that's what we're talking about here, right? What are the processes for doing that? Changing what you expect. And so here's one process. I'll just give you the 5 things that it comprises just quickly, and then if you like, we'll go through them with you, and you can, and anyone that's listening to this audio, of course, we would encourage them to do the same. Pick something you'd like to change and go through this process. So the 5 steps are: firstly, when you don't feel good about something, welcome the feeling in. Don't push it away. And by that we don't mean wallow in it. Mm-hmm. We want you to bring it into the light, because as long as it's lurking there in the shadows, creating in your world, then you can't deal with it. So welcome it in, all right? Second point is, just leave it there in the light, so to speak, sorry-looking thing that it is, and step back from it and mentally understand that you are creating everything in your world. You have the power to create, and you are creating. And step 3, let it go. Now, this letting go thing is a mental process. It's just a mental trick, if you like. We're asking you to do is to really sort of release that feeling, release that thought. Some people like to pick up a pencil and drop it. The visceral feeling of dropping it helps them with the idea of release. Some people see it as a balloon, let it float away. Some people see it as a house around them that's imprisoning them and the walls suddenly drop. Some people like to kick it in the butt. My personal favourite is to flush it, right? So whatever works for you, let it go.
Okay.
All right, now, the sense of release may be strong, may be weak. If it's weak, go back and go back to step 1. See if you can get that feeling back again. Step back from it, recognize you're the creator of your world. Step 3, let it go. Now, when you go back to step 1 in this process, you can go around this 1, 2, 3 loop quite a bit. When you go back to step 1, the feeling may be less or maybe stronger. Sometimes it's stronger because now you're starting to really let it in. You really bring it into the light. But as you work at this, you'll find it gets harder and harder to get to that degree, that depth of emotion, that feeling bad about it, all right? And so when you let it go eventually, you get a sense that something has actually shifted. And what has shifted is you've made a dent in that old sort of cast iron belief system back there that this is the way the world is. You started to repaint the picture that's back there. Then step 4 is give yourself a pat on the back. This is the quote-unquote work. This is what you have to do. You're not, It's not doing things, it's not struggling, it's not deciding strategies, making this sort of statement over in plans and, doing all that stuff. It is imagining where you want to be. And now we're getting to step 5, which is just that. What would the world be like without that lie? Without that thing that's holding you back? What would it look like? What would it feel like? What will it feel like? What does it feel like? Because we want you to step into it. We want you to get into that world and see the world as it could be in this new place. So that's the steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you ready to go through these?
Okay.
Good. All right. So let yourself feel what doesn't feel good. And when you got it, let me know. Welcome it in. Let it build up. Shouldn't be too hard for some of these things because you're picking things that are raw, right? And they're close to us.
I got it.
Okay, good. Now just leave it there in the light, so to speak, now that you've welcomed it in. And even just the act of welcoming it in changes it a little bit. But leave it there and just sort of mentally step back from a bit and recognize you creating all of this. You are the author of your screenplay. This is not a cast iron thing stuck out there. You can change it. When you've done that, let it go with whatever image works for you.
Okay.
Now, and for the listeners also, the question is, how did that feel?
For me, relief.
Relief, good. Strong? Mild?
It was mild, but it's it's almost like a feeling of hope because it's like, okay, I'm getting what needs to be done instead of using the logic and,
Good, excellent. But just for the hell of it, let's go back to step 1.
Okay.
So bring that feeling in again. Think of the things that cause you to have that feeling. Welcome it in. Then step back from it. Recognize it's based on a lie, that you're the one that's in charge here. And step 3, let it go. Let us know when you're done.
Okay.
Now, when you went back to step 1, was it as easy to get the feeling back?
No, it's quite funny. Now it almost seems like ridiculous, the stuff that has caused so much, I suppose, anger.
Yeah.
It almost seems like, oh my gosh, because it's been the same thing for 7 years.
Sure.
Every time anything happens. So,
and we're not saying that, you'll note the we here, we've decided that we'll be our way into this conversation. Okay? It is not like this will suddenly magically transform your world, Amy. But what you are doing here is starting to change your habits of thinking. And so we would encourage you that if this comes up again, to go through this process. And if you do it 200 times this week, this will be time well spent.
Okay.
All right? This is the work. And we will step aside and let Robin continue here. You can see the eye wheeze when I have an attack of the eye wheeze here. Now, I want you to give yourself a pat on the back here for having done this. This is the work. All right?
Okay.
Now, I want you to step through the door that says, this is a new world here. And it's a world in which the lie that I'm not in charge is no longer in existence. In other words, I'm the one that's creating it. I want you may see a door here, I want you to push it open and step through. It's like stepping from black and white into Technicolor.
Okay.
It's like stepping into sunshine. I want you to actually get into that world. See your world from this point on as if you're in charge, and how things flow to you. But the world comes to you as and when you want it to.
Nice.
Be in it. See your day. See your day flowing. See the day that's coming up, and imagine what it will be like in this new version of the world, because literally it is a new version of the world. It is not the same world you were going to create an hour ago. You have stepped into a different version of the world.
I love it.
We want you to experience that. We want you to see it. We want you to feel it. We want you to be in it. We want you to splash around in it. Get the feeling of it. This is the way life is supposed to be. You are at choice in everything. And now, Amy, we want you to, this is another little exercise which is very useful. So, I want you to put yourself out 24 hours. Imagine we're having this conversation, and listeners, if you do the same thing here, put yourself out 24 hours from now. You've just stepped into that new world. You've just experienced a day in this new world, living in a way that has peace and power and fun and freedom in a way you've never experienced. I want you to imagine that now you're 24 hours out and we're having this conversation again. So speak as if it's 24 hours out. I want you to tell me how that day was and how you feel now, Amy.
Speak how my day was after I've been creating it myself.
You've just had this day, yes.
This day has been so fantastic. Everything that I thought of came to me instantly. Everything that was positive. Everyone that I met was joyous. I was skipping down the sidewalk. It was sunny, and there was lots of flowers everywhere. It was perfect, and I feel an immense love washing over me continually for everyone and everything.
Good. And how do you feel now?
I want to burst out laughing.
Good.
It's pretty exciting, and it's like, I hope that people at home actually did that exercise, because I can't believe it's a subtle shift, but it's like it actually feels like a little snippet of what freedom is.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, what you've done here is literally changed the world that you're going to be in, Amy. Now, does this mean that life is going to be nirvana for you from this point on? No. You have a whole fabric of expectations about the world, and you're creating all the time, all right? But this is your world. You're in charge. And so when you get contrast, as we call it, which is, when you experience things that are negative, that cause you to feel negative, if you can allow yourself to be an observer of the game as well as playing the game, if you will just step back from it a little bit and say, okay, I created this. It's not them that's doing this to me, or it's not this that happened to me. It's not that thing over there that's pinging on me and making me angry or whatever. This is my creation. This is me doing my thing. And just allow yourself to see that. Then you'll find that this contrast takes on a whole different aspect. You can never blame anybody for anything ever again. You are never a victim of anything ever again.
makes me want to. I actually feel like I want to like just have laughter bursting out of me, because it's like, what a way to live. It's perfect.
Absolutely. This is the way it's supposed to be. This is what you came here to do, to play. This is the game you came to play, and we are encouraging you, of course, to step into it and play it.
That's a deal.
Let me add one more thing here, which will probably also blow your mind.
I don't know if I can take this, Robin. Okay.
You talked about his ex sending you emails or something, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So let's imagine, for example, that you're in your email, you're in your emails in the morning, and there you see this email from her. How do you feel?
I'm actually this is my honest heart truth.
Yep.
Before doing this, I was afraid of her.
Right.
I was like, what next? Oh my God, another attack.
Okay. So here you're looking at this line there that says, from so and so, and the subject is, and you know what's coming, don't you?
Mm.
All right.
I know.
Well, guess what?
That's wrong.
Guess what's coming. All right. What you know is coming is what is coming.
I know.
Here's the blow your mind part. You create your world second by second. All right. Until you open that email, it does not exist. So can you see that if you get yourself to a better feeling place before you click on that email and open it, you can create a different email. It will not be the same as the one you open when you're expecting it to be gloom and doom.
Okay. I'm gonna test this one, Robin.
If you will allow yourself just to know that intellectually, it may seem a big leap to move, all right, to swallow. We had a story of one of our guys that was in New York, and he was having trouble paying his bills, and he didn't go to the mail because he knew there was going to be bills, so he put it off for a couple of days. Then he finally went down and cleared out his mail. He brought it up, and he was not feeling good about it. He knew there were going to be more bills than he could pay. So he put them in his briefcase and shut the briefcase and went to bed. And next morning he got up, he was feeling a lot better. He was feeling very positive. He knows the rules. He knew what he had to do. He was feeling a lot better. He opened the briefcase. There were less bills than he thought, and there was a check in there that he hadn't expected. And I said to Tara, well, it wasn't the same mail that he had the night before. And they said, of course not. It cannot be the same mail because you create your world second by second.
I love it. I believe it. And, even on that note, when, say, my husband and I are sending a request for, we want to take the boys to Jamaica, and we're like, oh, my God, please don't let this be responded with, like, no, and tearing us apart. And it's like, and then when we get the response, it's like, oh, I bet it's going to be a knockback, sure, or whatever. Absolutely. And it's like, when you describe it, it's like, just using that one little example in my life of that relationship, it's like, it is so clear to me now what's going on. And like, I'm fully grateful for you walking me through that, because sometimes it takes someone from the outside, right?
Yep.
And it seems so clear to me now. And yeah, thank you.
If you will allow yourself to expect that woman to act differently, all right, you will be amazed at the way she will show up.
Oh, God, love you. I'm so grateful because yeah, well, anyways, thank you. I really appreciate that. It's like, yes, I appreciate that so much because yeah, it's been hard. So thank you.
Good.
Now, any final words of wisdom today after all those teachings? I mean, what a gift. Absolutely beautiful gift you've given everyone. Anything else you want to add today?
Well, no, as we said at the start, it's not necessary for you to know how it all works. It's just necessary for you to understand that feeling good is very important. And when you're feeling good, you're creating what you want. So always reach for the better feeling thought. That's the bottom line of it all. Now, for those of you that need to know a little more in order to be confident and comfortable that you can do this, we have offered all this sort of explanation about everything. And, of course, if that's of interest to you, then run with it. And for many of you like this one, of course, the explanation is very important. He is intensely curious about the way things work. And so we have great fun explaining to him and opening up things to him. And we hope in some small way today that each of you has taken some of this and understand it and will be even more determined to create the world differently. You see, you have a fabric, a process of thought. Most of you think by default. Your thoughts go in two directions. They go in the direction that one thought follows another. One thought leads to another. Well, how does it lead to another? It's by the associations you have stored away in your subconscious. It just rolls out. These thoughts just stream out. And then something in the external world happens to you. You open your email, right? And now you're making sometimes conscious decisions, sometimes subconscious decisions about it all. But in all of this, you are reacting to either what's flowing from you or flowing in from the world. We want you to intervene. We want you to stop that default thinking. If you would like to change things, intervene and start to change the direction of your conscious thought. That is your choice. That is your power. And you can therefore step into a new world.
Robin, I'm going to intervene and thank you so much. I'm a little bit speechless because that was really so moving for me and so helpful, and it was really, really lovely that you took the time today to run through everything with the audience and with myself.
Good.
Thank you.
It is our pleasure and his pleasure.
Lovely.
Good.
Thanks so much.
Good.
Take care.
Okay, Amy.